by knowing some place to contact. Maybe you're at the office and you have the big quake, and where's your family? Are the kids at school? Somebody's taking care of them. What do we do? So if your phone is working now, that'll be totally jammed up probably, but whenever you can, you get onto a phone and call somebody in a safe area. Well, we just had this terrible shake, and how's my wife doing? She called in? So they're a clearinghouse for such information, and that's
Sure.
It's very helpful to have such an ability to do that. Know that you don't want to be on an overpass when a big quake hits, and but it's hard to avoid it. I used to go along the San Andreas Fault as my seismic window was open, and I wasn't quite sure to hit the accelerator or the brake as going under an overpass. But I do not let earthquakes control my life at all, and the only one that ever scared me of 82 I have experienced was the World Series quake, and I had predicted it, and I was about to leave the office, as most of my colleagues had already done, to rush off to see the World Series, and there were about three of us left in the whole floor, and I was about to get on the elevator when I went over and saw the phone. I said, maybe there's been a foreshock I should know about. I went over to phone the Berkeley seismographic station, and I was punching out the numbers. I had about 2 more numbers to go, and the quake hit. And it was a huge, 7.1, the most I'd ever experienced. And the building rocked and bounced, and it was there were filing cabinets falling, and in my whole office, you couldn't see the floor anymore. All the books and rocks were on the floor. But I saved a big microfilm reader from toppling off the floor as I was moving back and forth trying to stand up. And, of course, a number of people were hauling in the elevators. They were all stranded between floors. And I had to go down the steps after about 2 minutes when the building stopped shaking. Tall buildings shake a lot longer. The ground itself, near the epicenter, only moved about 15 seconds. And can you imagine to have it shake for 4 minutes like it did with the quake in Sendai here in Japan? It was about 3.5 minutes with the Anchorage quake in '64. So most of us can stand, a few seconds of movement, and it doesn't bother us that much. But when it gets up to 30 seconds or a minute, that's when the dangerous times occur, because slightly weakened buildings will show their weakness much more clearly.
You said that you are sensing not only a window in March, but also potentially something in April. Can you talk about that?
Well, I send out to all of my subscribers in January of each year what I call the top window, the top window for each month.
Yes.
So it's March 19 to 26 and April 17 to 25, both at the time of the full moon, both at the time when the moon is at perigee, and these create what are called perigean spring tides. To get a perigee nearest closest of the moon on the same day as a syzygy happens from 2 to 5 times a year. So these are always clear seismic windows. And then the other windows on the list, ones for each month, are much lesser concern. Although we can look ahead now to see a perigean spring tide in, let's see what I'm looking at here, September 27 to October 4, and October 24 to 31. And so those are the 4 seismic windows of this year, the top windows.
How do you know where they're going to occur? That's my question.
Oh, that's a very good point. And that's the sun and moon position only tell me when. They do not tell me where or how big, and that's when I rely upon the animals and the hot springs and the geysers and the sensitive people, and sometimes a buildup of radon gas. So that tells you, adds to your certainty that something is likely to happen. Now, it never do really know for certain, and I've been wrong, about 25% of the time. And this time I'm giving this a 90% chance for a quake of 3.5 to 6.5 hit within 140 miles of Los Angeles, within 140 miles of San Francisco, and in the states of Washington and Oregon. And we just had a whole rash of small quakes up in southern Oregon and northern California, up to 5.0 and then 4.6, 4.5, 4.4. And as an example of where not to worry, and yet there's a lot of scare tactics out there, is Arkansas. They have had a whole rash of quakes over the last couple of years. I mean, hundreds of quakes, and very unusual. And the maximum about 4.7 last month. And so the word was going out, oh boy, the whole central part of the U.S. is about to explode or cause a huge quake like in 1811, 1812 in New Madrid, Missouri. And so once I got the facts, I said, don't worry about that, because these quakes are artificially caused by people, by drillers, because they're doing hydrofracturing, freeing natural gas from the shales down about 2 miles deep. And sure enough, they're centered right around where they're doing the drilling in central Arkansas. And so the same thing happened in Colorado in the early 60s. And one geologist back there said, Denverites never felt a quake before, or more than a little tiny one, and they had up to 5.5 and did some damage back there. He said, that's the same time they've been drilling these big holes here at Rocky Flats and getting rid of chemical warfare waste that they were not evaporating nicely. They just inserting these deep holes and figuring out a sight, out of mind, and then the quakes began to develop. So the high science said, come on, we're just drilling holes and putting fluids in the ground. That is not affecting these earthquakes. It's like saying we could raise the Rockies with an eyedropper. And so these comments come out, and this geologist almost lost his job. But they had to shut down the big pumps for maintenance, and then the earthquake stopped. And after about a month, they started up the pumps again, and after a few days, the quakes began again. And then the powers that be said, oh, we thought so all the time. It's perfectly logical. And that has become, since the mid-'60s now, that's become known, as has the fact that large reservoirs can trigger quakes, because the weight of the water and the infiltration of the water into the deep flow allows faults to slip. And this was poo-pooed for years and years until finally they got enough records showing that areas of new filling of dams after the reservoir had been filled, the quakes would begin, and some of them are damaging quakes over 6 magnitude, where they hadn't had quakes before. So that's another bit of common knowledge. Now, it won't be long before people will look at the phase of the moon and say that odds go up for a quake in a seismically active area. And then if they were bold enough, they would start paying attention to the animals as well. So this is, part of the story, and it's interesting. I could not publish on this myself. I submitted papers to international meetings, and generally they were rejected. So that's astrology. You're looking at the moon, and we're looking at the Earth. Well, I'm looking at both.
This is all about new knowledge, really. It's all about the fear of new knowledge and people being invested in something and it being rendered antiquated or not useful anymore or not effective or have gotten to the level at which it was in use and no longer productive anymore.
I've reached the age of 80, and so I don't care what my critics say anymore because they're the ones that have the problem.
I agree with you. Can you talk a little bit about the Madrid fault line?
New Madrid, yeah.
New Madrid. Talk about that. There's a big concern about this now.
Well, it's in 1811, 1812, beginning on December 16th of 1811, a huge quake, and you see various readings. Almost certainly it was at least an 8 magnitude quake. It rang bells in Boston and felt in all across the East Coast. And it caused the Mississippi River to flow backwards for a while as a big wave swept up. And there was an early steamboat coming down the Ohio River. It just entered the Mississippi, and all of a sudden it was back in the Ohio. And many Indian villages were flooded, and there's hardly any population out there. James Audubon was there and wondered why his horse suddenly stopped. And he got off the horse to see if it hurt his foot or something, and then the quake hit.